My name is Luis Ballesteros. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Strategy and Innovation. I do research on disruptions, what happens with business organizations when they navigate massive shocks like natural disasters, epidemics, terrorist attacks, financial crisis, and how these shocks affect decision-making inside the organizations and outside organizations, and how organizations also help societies navigate the consequences of disasters. This is a really important question. It has very important social connotations given the increasingly demanding grand challenge of helping societies navigating disasters. In fact, related with your question, the United Nations recently stated that business organizations are posed to bring systematic change in humanitarian aid delivery by bringing new resources, but more importantly, to use these resources more effectively. So these are, to me, the two most important elements to answer this question. First, firms bring new resources to reduce the growing gap of financing disaster relief and recovery around the world. And traditionally, we think about public entities and multilateral agencies helping communities that are affected by catastrophes such as natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and pandemics just recently. But for over 20 years, we have for-profit organizations being the fastest growing sector in financing disaster relief and recovery at the international level. There are two things that explain this trend. On one side, we have that the inflation-adjusted value of public aid has dropped steadily over time because of urbanization, the geographic concentration of capital, the modification of the natural environment. These factors have resulted in more destructive, costly disasters every single year. And public aid has not kept pace with this cost. So international aid, for instance, now covers less than 3% of direct damages created by disasters. And every year, more than half of the United Nations humanitarian appeals remain unmet. On the other side, market activity now is international in nature. It means that most companies, regardless of size, have some type of foreign activity to either obtain inputs or supply products and services. This means that contemporary firms are more exposed to a wide range of disasters than similar firms 2 decades ago. And this has resulted in the proportion of the largest 10,000 multinational enterprises, just to give you an example, at the international level, engaging in corporate disaster philanthropy, donating in the aftermath of these massive shocks. In any given year, this proportion going from 35% to over 90% in only 15 years. The second and perhaps more important factor of why firms can provide systematic change in disaster aid has to do with understanding whether having organizations whose main purpose is to produce profits, supplying aid, whether this is socially beneficial than getting more aid, for instance, from public and nonprofit entities. And we have evidence of this. In recent analysis, my co-authors and I find that when there is a substantial share of disaster aid that comes from companies with local operations, there is over twice the amount of cash and in-kind resources in the affected areas by the end of the 4th week after the disaster. Twice the amount. This is very important because how fast aid comes to the victims explains the magnitude of the human and economic damage. Moreover, when companies fund a large portion of disaster relief and recovery, the Human Development Index of the affected country is going to be as high as 1 times the same measure of similar countries affected by disaster that mostly receive the aid from public actors. So what can explain these results? We traditionally argue that multinational enterprises with local operations in the affected area that overlap their philanthropy with their core operations have dynamic capabilities in disaster response. So in comparison with non-market actors, because of their attention to economic processes, firms receive better signals to sense areas of market distress and focus on damaged goods that are instrumental for the firm's operations and the functioning of the market. Additionally, a local presence facilitates transferring resources across geographies using the company's subsidiaries and assets. Managers allocating philanthropy in this way do not have to go through the lengthy protocol that traditional public aid follows. Finally, firms often reconfigure their skills, expertise, material resources, and operations to help with the logistics of receiving and supplying aid, cleaning debris, rebuilding infrastructure, and reestablishing services. Let me give you an example. Coca-Cola oftentimes convert its soft drink production lines to bottled water and use its own trucks to distribute the resource to disaster victims. In so doing, Coke has been able to quickly produce and distribute an essential good for disaster relief in a cost-efficient and effective manner. Similarly, companies like Walmart, UPS, and DHL have dedicated organizational units for disaster response that oftentimes are fully in charge of the logistics to receive and distribute aid in disaster zones. Thus, the greater the overlap between a firm's core market operation and the social need, the greater the business manager's capacity in the non-market area in philanthropy. So in this way, the firm is able to use its routines and competences to supply disaster goods with even greater efficiency than public and multilateral entities. And in this way, companies can help serve a critical role in being a stopgap in the aftermath of disasters. Yes, so beyond an evaluation of the firm's connection with the affected community that I just mentioned and the impact of the disaster on the firm, that obviously is going to be an important factor to understand how much resources the company has to allocate toward philanthropy. The central factor to be considered is the underlying motive of company philanthropy, why the firm wants to donate in the first place. And there are many reasons for which firms donate in the aftermath of disasters. But we can encapsulate all of these reasons into two categories. First, decision makers want to satisfy social preferences. So for instance, managers of a company feel that they need to reciprocate for the goodwill that the firm has received over time of operations in a specific community, or simply they feel good, a warm glow for being altruistic. Or firms donate because some of their employees come from the affected community or the affected country and thus have a homophilic connection with the victims. It is well known, for instance, that the top management of many companies, when they donate in the aftermath of disasters, they match the donation initiated by their employees. On the other hand, regarding the motives to donate, there are strategic considerations, which relate to the argument that philanthropy can help differentiate a donor company from competitors and obtain a competitive advantage. Those scholars have studied how donating can improve a firm's reputation, for instance, as an organization that cares about societal issues. Consequently, customers may be willing to pay a higher price for the company's products and services. Its employees may feel more emotionally connected with the organization, with an organization that supports causes that they identify with, and therefore work more for the same level of compensation and increased labor productivity. Aligning philanthropy with local policymakers' preferred social areas may result in political capital for the company that favors the market activity. And finally, some scholars have suggested that philanthropy has insurance-like capabilities that hedge the firm against future disruptions such as scandals and economic crisis. But there is one single motive that has more explanatory power of this type of philanthropy than any other. And recent research has shown that the frequency and magnitude of company donations increase in the economic importance of the affected country for the organization. This is very intuitive. It means that the larger the stake the firm has in the affected country, the larger the willingness to donate. These firms help rebuild communication and transportation systems to get back the supply chain with schools and hospitals so their employees can leave their children during the day and recover their health to come to work. Therefore, allocating company resources following this motive is a way to invest into market operation and competition. Traditionally, donations from firms that have stakes in the market explain a substantial portion of company philanthropy in general. This is very important because in the last 15 years, company philanthropy has surpassed the total contribution of traditional sources of international aid for some disasters. This means that for some disaster events, companies have given a total amount that is much larger than the total amount coming from other entities. I'm talking about foreign governments and non-profit organizations, multilateral agencies, and also individual charity. So this is a phenomenon that has no precedent in the history of philanthropy and disaster management. And firms with local operations in affected countries are basically fueling this trend. At the heart of this question, this is a really, really important question, and let me explain you why. At the heart of this question is probably the most influential factor affecting the donation amounts, how much a firm donates in the aftermath of disasters. If business decision makers consider philanthropy a part of due diligence to operate in a competitive market, then firms are likely to react when they see other companies in the same industry donating. This is a low-hanging fruit, obviously. But the influence of competitors in this area of philanthropy is way more complex than that. Because the question is how much a firm should donate in comparison with a competitor, right? Now that the firm has decided to donate, should the firm donate more than a rival and make a statement to stakeholders of being more socially responsive? Or should the company donate less to try to economize some philanthropy, but still getting some attention from stakeholders? What we have found in recent research is that in this type of philanthropy, and actually in all types of philanthropy, there's a lot of what we call imitation. And more than 65% of disaster events with donations from business organizations, we had found that there are companies donating the same amount, exactly the same amount as the first donor in the industry. Often they donate the same in-kind resources and to the same target beneficiary. This happens even when the first donor is radically different than the company followers. They had different sizes, they had a different number of employees in the affected market, they had a different market share. So what can explain this phenomenon? Well, imagine that you are in charge of your company's response to the last, let's say, big earthquake. How do you decide how much to donate? You know that the company wants to donate, but how much to donate is a decision that still is being evaluated. You perhaps believe that philanthropy should be aligned with the social need, meaning that the amount of donations should be proportional to the number of victims, for instance, of the economic damage. The problem is that calculating the human and material loss associated with disasters is a really lengthy process. Often takes months or years. For instance, you perhaps remember that for Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, took over 2 years to estimate the economic cost and the number of victims. Even understanding the direct impact on the company's employees, assets, and market is also a very complex process involving different assessments by the organization and actors outside the firm. So the social need is unknown. Should you wait for more information to decide about the donation? That would be a potentially good decision given the level of uncertainty, right? But if you do that, your firm is going to be left behind because companies do not wait for uncertainty to receive. Across all disasters since 2000, year 2000, over 98% of all company donations are pledged within 8 weeks after the disaster. There's still no information about the social need, no information about the number of victims, number of deaths, number of displaced people, no information about the economic damage. So what information do you and other managers use to decide the donation amount? In this degree of uncertainty, the decision makers like you often look for potential unrelated cues. In fact, the donation amount of the first donor in the industry, particularly when this donor is a large firm, explains more the average donation by companies in the same industry than objective measures of the social need. Number of deaths, economic damage, but also measures related with the company, the size of the company, the market share of the company, the characteristics of the company in general. So this type of heuristic is often used by organizations to navigate this type of uncertainty. That's the reason that the role of rivals is super important to decide the amount of the donation that firms are going to give in a given disaster. Yeah, I'm glad that we finished with this question, right? Because we talk about the strategy, we talk about the strategic value of philanthropy. Is this a promise that we realize often with companies donating in the aftermath of disasters? And with everything that I had mentioned so far regarding the lack of critical information to align philanthropy with the social need and the characteristics of the firm, I hope that you find unsurprising that the answer is, it depends. It depends, really. On the one hand, disasters are some of the most reported phenomena by the media around the world. Every year at the top of media coverage are disasters. So it follows that donating in the aftermath of these events offers an outstanding stage to expose to the public the philanthropic efforts of a company. But on the other hand, philanthropic decisions are characterized by inefficiency in general. And this is regardless of the company's donor size and experience donating. So for instance, by analyzing the revenue impacts associated with donating to all major epidemics, natural disasters, and terrorist attacks that had affected the world in the last 2 decades, we find that company philanthropy is more likely to result in losses than in gains. And losses that are not explained by normal market operation or other type of decisions, including decisions in other type of philanthropy, other type of non-market areas. The level of uncertainty under which the company decisions take place explains this result. How firms navigate uncertainty, as you can imagine, therefore determines really the financial value of donations. So let me explain what matters. I talked before about how firms do not have information about the social need when making donations. But if you think about it, the external stakeholder, the customer, the investor, the policymaker, the employee, as an internal stakeholder, face the same level of uncertainty. They don't know whether a 20 million donation is too little or too much for a given firm, given that we don't know the extent of the damage. Because the stakeholders have no easily accessible method to understand the contextual value of company philanthropy in this context, one can imagine that the material characteristics of the donation are not a relevant factor to predict the financial outcome of philanthropy as other factors. For instance, we have found that the pre-existing reputation of the first company donating predicts the associated gain or loss more than the donation amount, whether the firm donates in kind of cash or the company size and performance. So again, the reputation of the company before the disaster determines whether this company obtains a gain or a loss. And the size of the donation, the type of the donation, and the characteristics of the donor, meaning the size, the number of employees, the asset, the market share, are not as important as the reputation of the company. So it seems that stakeholders judge the ability or sincerity of the firm in the philanthropic area with its recent behavior in the affected market. Those good reputation donors, first donors, are likely to be rewarded versus bad reputation donors that oftentimes observe a negative outcome. Not only that, but stakeholders often transfer the judgments from the first company donor to those that match its donation. Those firms that donate the same amount that the first donor in the industry observe a similar financial impact. Followers that donate the same amount as a company with a good reputation are likely to observe positive results, and negative results are likely to those that imitate the donation of a first donor with a negative reputation. Now, the interesting thing is that because the first donors in an industry tend to have bad reputations. We believe because companies perceive that donating in the aftermath of the disaster is going to help the company to recover the reputation, to recover the reputation among their stakeholders. They believe that donating in the aftermath of these events is going to be really instrumental and is going to be beneficial for the company. So they frequently donate. Companies with bad reputations frequently donate. Because there's a lot of matching by followers in the same industry, it means that there's a lot of spillover effects of the reputation of the first donor toward these companies that match the donations. And this explains why overall across all disasters we normally observe a negative association between donating in the aftermath of disasters and revenue. Taken all together, donating in the aftermath of disasters can be a decision that results in financial benefits that are not explained by market operation and other non-market decisions. And these are decisions there are specific actions that business decision makers can follow to better navigate the uncertainty that affects philanthropy. Using the knowledge that research has brought, managers can strengthen the possibility that this type of company philanthropy is a win-win situation, one that helps societies recover from disasters in a more efficient way and in a faster way, and one that can help the firm realize the promise of the strategic value of philanthropy. Thank you.